Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jonah. I am here with Discover, and we are talking today to Christian from We Are No Code. Super excited. Worked with Christian a couple times on Discover, and always a good time. Always gets my mind just absolutely whirring in what is possible in the world of no code. Before we get going, if we can take a second, just let us know in the comments if you can hear us, if you can see us. Christian, how are you doing? Would you give a little wave and a hello so we can make sure the audio and video is all working?
What is up, everybody? I'm Christian Peverelli. Thanks, Jonah, and the entire team for having us for this Discover event. It's always such a great time. Looking forward to present and to kind of let people know that there is this awesome new way of building startups, specifically for non-technical people. And that's been something that we've dedicated our life to now. And it's always a pleasure to put on these events.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. It really is always a pleasure, and just gets, like I said, I'm always leaving these events with you, just being like, what could be possible? But before we dive in, for everyone watching, just a couple expectations, things we should know. Feel free to hop in the chat at any point. Let us know where you're tuning in from, what you're excited to learn. If you're watching the replay, feel free to use the comments. We love and come back to those comments, and love answering those questions and just seeing what you think about these events and our creators. If anything is moving fast or you have to get up from the computer for a moment, don't fret. This all will be available as a replay on the YouTube page and the Discover event page. And if you have any questions throughout the event or in the replay, pop them in the comments. We will have a dedicated Q&A after the presentation proper. So if we don't get to your question during the presentation, we will at the end there. And yeah, let's give a proper introduction here. Like I said, we're talking to Christian Peverelli, and today we're going to be learning how to launch your app business in 60 days without developers. And we're going to break down the exact strategies that non-technical founders are using to bootstrap their companies from idea to 20K per month in reoccurring revenue. Little background on Christian. Christian is a serial entrepreneur and digital strategist with over 12 years of experience building startups, running accelerators, and consulting for Fortune 500 companies and celebrities. As a trainer, Christian has served as the co-director of a startup program that has helped over 100 startups go on to raise over 40 million in funding and get into accelerators like Techstars, Y Combinator, and 500 Startups. All that said, I want to get out of the way so we can dive into this. So, Christian, I'm going to hand it over to you.
I love the fancy introduction. No pressure on me, but yeah. No, I always appreciate it. I can also see Peter here in the chat. He's saying hello from Toronto. Really nice to see you. So it's awesome that people are live. If you have questions, again, Jonah will be moderating some of those questions. We'll be answering questions at the end of the presentation. If some are really about like the timing, I told Jonah, feel free to interrupt me at any time. We're trying to make this relatively interactive. And we do have quite a bit to cover, so excited to jump into the slides. So are you ready, Jonah? Should we do this?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Awesome. So essentially, I want to bring you through a little bit of a story. We're going to try to keep this to the point because there's a lot I'm trying to cover in this presentation. But again, there's a replay, so don't worry if you can't scribble down the notes, all that. So essentially, this presentation is called Building Startups Without Code, and it's a guide for non-technical founders. My name is Christian Peverelli, co-founder of We Are No Code. We've put it on for some amazing institutions before. People always see a huge amount of value. We have people from around the world who have trusted us, and so it's always a pleasure to put it on. So who is this for? There are two categories. The first one are aspiring entrepreneurs, so essentially someone who has an idea for a startup or an online business, or someone who simply wants to become an entrepreneur. They might not have an idea now, but they have that sort of entrepreneurial bug. So this is going to be really useful to kind of figure out that step-by-step process to launching your startup from scratch and without technical skills. Then there's also the entrepreneurs themselves, so startup founders, people who are already in the process of building out their companies, their startups. They may have already built startups in the past, and they're having some issues when it comes to building the app, the website, the MVP, as non-technical people. They may have tried to work with development teams and had struggles there. Here, we're really going to teach you how to build software products very quickly and cost effectively without having to depend on outside developers. So, what will you be learning today? We're first going to be quickly talking about why 2021 and beyond is a really big moment of opportunity for everyone who's in the audience right now. Then we're going to jump into this sort of non-technical dilemma. After that, we'll be talking about no code. So I'm going to introduce you to the power of no code, what it is, what's possible. And at the end, we'll be talking about building startups without writing a single line of code. So how you can literally go from just an idea in your head to first paying customers and then scale that up to thousands and thousands of dollars in monthly recurring revenue. We will be talking a little bit about our program towards the end for those of you interested, and we'll have a Q&A to finish it off so that we can answer all your questions. Let's jump into it. You will also be receiving a free toolkit for those of you who have joined today. So this will be everything that you need to be able to get started with your journey immediately for $0. Let's give a couple of introductions here. So first of all, I know you've heard a little bit about me already. I was born in Switzerland, grew up pretty much all over the world, speak a bunch of languages. I'm the founder of 3 startups and have raised funding for 2 of those and have had an exit. I then became the director of Startup Boost LA, where I served as the director. We trained over 100 startups who went on to raise more than $40 million in funding and got accepted into some of the top investing accelerators as well. So I've kind of been on both sides of the story, right? We used to put on a program, select essentially about 8 to 10 teams every 6 months out of about 400 applications. We would train them for a 6-week period, and then we would put them on stage at Google, and they would pitch in front of 100 to 150 investors. So always amazing. I really have transitioned into loving teaching founders how to build companies and continue to build my own as well. I've trained founders like Frank, who raised $300,000, has his first round, got into Mucker Labs. Also trained Anna, the CEO of AlgoPay. She raised $320,000 and got into Techstars. And Chris, who raised $500,000 for Audio Cardio as well. A lot of this changed when I met my co-founder, Eddie. So a little bit of background, he is German-Russian, speaks a couple languages himself. When I met him, he was the head of product and innovation for one of the largest independent agencies here in the United States. And he was building software products and prototyping for some of the largest brands out there. But one of the things that really completely changed my way of seeing how startups should be built was really the moment I discovered that he was spending on average between $100 and $1,000 to build these products from the ground up, using this exciting thing that at the time wasn't even called anything. Today is called no code, and we'll be talking more about that in just a second. But when I met Eddie, he had built a startup called Sizely. He had built this in 90 days for $1,000 and was able to scale it to $15,000 in monthly recurring revenue. It's a platform that helps with sizing for people who are selling on eBay, Amazon, Poshmark, etc. And it allows them to make more money because there are less returns happening for the wrong sizes. So this was really just one of the examples that I saw. And the craziest thing was that he did this without learning how to code or hire developers. He did it without investors or having a huge upfront cost, as you saw from this example. And he was also able to do it without leaving his full-time day job at the time, just to show that you don't have to take a huge amount of risk at the beginning of the startup journey. Now, I automatically brought him into the accelerator because I thought there was a lot of value in what he was doing, and it became very obvious that me and him were going to be building something very exciting together. So fast forward, we ended up building We Are No Code. We empower non-technical founders. We're an online institute or an online school that teaches people how to build startups from the ground up as non-techies. And we've had the luxury to be able to build this company and to be able to train startup founders and empower them along the journey. Founders like Heidi, who went from idea to $7,000 in monthly recurring revenue with Aware Health. She was able to do this as a first-time founder with absolutely no technical skills. And she's actually scaling up now from 200 monthly active paying customers to 2,000. So she's also in a growth spurt for her startup as well. Other founders like David, who won a pitch competition for .la that was actually being, he built it in 10 days and acquired 2,000 users over the next 3 months. Then he won a competition that was being actually, the judges were the managing director of Techstars LA, as well as some founders of some amazing companies, one of them being Zillow. So that's pretty much it. We have so many founders who have had great experiences, and so it's a pleasure for us to be able to now have trained 350 startups from around the world. Again, most of these startups were non-technical entrepreneurs. So now let's jump into why 2021 is just this amazing opportunity. There's a lot of crazy things that have been going on, and I think that people don't realize that actually this is a huge time of opportunity. So let me explain. Basically, a lot of things have changed in our world based on the pandemic and other factors. So the way that we work, the way that we eat, the way that we buy, the way that we travel, and even the way that we learn, and many, many more things have changed as well. And oftentimes, in times of change, there is just a huge amount of opportunity that comes from that. So if we use sort of the example of the recession in 2008, we saw some of the most successful companies be built. And guess what? They're all software companies. And that is pretty much because every business is a software business. This is Mark Andreessen. That's his quote. He invested in pretty much every big startup that you know of, including Lyft, Slack, Airbnb, Coinbase, GitHub, and many, many, many more. And he is in Silicon Valley. And it really doesn't really matter whether you're building software or you're building wood. His quote really is talking about the fact that you require some sort of software in every single business that you're looking to build. And that kind of brings us to the question, like, who is capitalizing on these opportunities? Who's able to currently capitalize on these opportunities and take advantage of them? Well, up until now, it's been a tiny fraction of the population. These people are called developers or coders or app builders for those who are very non-technical. And so that's just really a very, very small population of people who've made every single online experience that you know or have interacted with today. Any website, any sort of app, et cetera, et cetera. And most of us look at this and we're just radically confused, right? We have no idea what code means. We don't understand coding languages. And that's quite frustrating. And it leads us to this thing called the non-technical dilemma. So the reason why this takes place is, let me just give you a little bit of context. So the first thing is investment scene has matured. So essentially back in the day, in 2005, you could raise capital, you could raise money from investors to go out there and build that idea you had in your head. And you didn't necessarily need to have much more than that to be able to raise a couple $100,000 and get things built and launched. Now that number is way more, like you have to do a lot more to be able to be interesting for investors, for accelerators, and for people who are willing to support you along your journey. And that kind of leaves the question like, well, how are you supposed to go about the building process? How are you, this is where the dilemma sort of starts. I just wanted to show you a quick thing to really express what I'm talking, to kind of validate. We're seeing an increasing number of deals going towards startups that have revenue. So back in 2010, only 10% of the deals were going to people who had revenue, startups that had revenue. And now in 2017, that number was more than 50%. These days, we're talking about 80% of all deals are going to startups with revenue. So again, now comes the big question. How am I supposed to build that app? How am I supposed to build that website? How am I supposed to do that? What are my options as a non-technical founder? And this is where the non-technical dilemma really comes into play. These are pretty much the options. And I'm going to talk over each one of them very briefly. Essentially, one of them is hiring developers. The other one is going for offshore developers or cheaper developers. Then we have people looking for technical co-founders. And then the other option is to learn how to code. Now, hiring developers. Let's start with this one. Now, as you may have sort of understood, if you've gone out and tried to find developers, it is an expensive thing. It costs between $25,000 and hundreds of thousands of dollars to build out that app for you. I put a couple of different sources here just so you can see the numbers. but essentially it is a minimum about $15,000 to $50,000 to get just a very first basic product out of the door. And unfortunately here, the problem is that most people will build all the features that you want because they are being hired by the hour. And unfortunately, a lot of people end up spending a lot of money and building products that people don't necessarily want. Go over that in a little bit, but hiring developers at the very beginning is not necessarily a cost-effective way of launching your startup. Now, hiring cheap developers can also be another sort of problem. This is something that we end up calling, spaghetti code. It's code that it's much cheaper, but is being written and is pretty much unusable, ends up being very buggy. And so even though you're only spending a couple $1,000s to build out that product, it ends up being unusable. And in many cases, you're actually just wasting your money. And so that's very frustrating for most people, specifically because you've probably spent a long time interacting with those developers, trying to get things off the ground. And you just feel like, oh my God, I've just thrown away all this money. Not to mention that regardless of what kind of developers that you hire, there's always going to be an additional cost, an additional bill that you have to pay. And early on, it's really important to understand that that amount of money is high risk, right? You're investing in just some idea you have in your head. So this is oftentimes not a great sort of solution to your problem either. Another option is waiting for a tech co-founder. So I've seen plenty of people do this, go to networking events trying to find the right tech co-founder to join their startup. Now, the big problem here is that the chances of finding a tech co-founder that fits all the criteria you're looking for is incredibly low. So someone needs to have the skills to build out the platform or app you're looking to build. They need to actually share your vision and mission, meaning that they're as excited about everything you're doing. You need to be able to get along with them on a personal, but also a professional level. These are people you're going to be working for 5 to 10 years, and are willing to sacrifice their job at sort of high-paying company. Because let's face it, these people have plenty of opportunities coming their way every day. So this is pretty much ends up being kind of like going to a bar to try to find your spouse, husband, or spouse, right? It's very unlikely. Now, is it possible? It is possible. But I just see so many people ending up wasting a huge amount of time going out to all these events instead of focusing on building their startups. So not to mention that a lot of startups fail because of internal disputes between co-founders. I've seen it happen time and time again. And I can tell you it's not a very pretty picture. So if you get committed to another co-founder too early, that is the risk that you are running. The other option is learning how to code. Now, I won't get too much into that, but this is what my face looks like or looked like when I tried to learn how to code, specifically taking Python. And I think it just takes a long amount of time between 2 to 3 years to become good at something. And oftentimes it's quite frustrating as well, because not everyone is made to code. Let's just put it that way. But maybe one of the worst things that I see happening is people not really taking action, trying to kind of continue to do research, talking to all their friends about this idea, getting every opportunity to get feedback on the idea from people that care about them, but not actually taking steps that build value in their startup, that really puts the startup to test and that tests the validity of your idea in the marketplace itself. And so this is actually really sad to see. And most people are actually really running the risk of running in circles, right? They end up spending a bunch of time, between 6 and 18 months is what I was seeing on average, looking through thousands of startup applications. Also wasting a huge amount of money. So putting down the money, the people who have the most money end up wasting the most money early stage. And also missing out on opportunities, because each opportunity is usually relatively time sensitive. And so often seeing other people take ideas that they had for years and actually taking action with them, and guess what? Getting results. So that can be frustrating as well. But not to mention that some people just get frustrated with what they're working on because they're not really advancing, and they end up giving up on themselves and their ideas. And I think that that's really sad, because I'm a big believer that every entrepreneur is a learned entrepreneur. Some people are more sort of prone to risk, and that's totally fine. But again, I want to bring you through this presentation and bring you through some of the reasons why I believe that. Let's talk about some of these misconceptions that we have walking into entrepreneurship. The first one I'd say is just assuming that it is just going to be the same thing as working your full-time job. It's a completely different skill. You have to learn skills that are much more general to be able to take action in every domain, and then you're learning more and more. But here are some of the big misconceptions. The first one is I need to be technical to build my startup. The second one is I need to leave my 9-to-5 job to get started. Again, huge misconception. And then I need investors or a lot of money to build my startup. Now, these three used to absolutely be correct. And these days, it's just no longer the case, right? In the old world, this was true. And now there's this awesome new way of building for non-techies. And I'm going to bring you into that right now. It's called no code. I'm going to introduce you to that. And to do that, I wanted to really bring up sort of the evolution of programming overall, because I think that will make you understand what this is all about. So back in the day, there were these sort of computers that were probably the size of your entire apartment building, and we used to feed punch cards into them. And the reason why we did that is because every single one of those sort of holes in that punch card represents ones and zeros. It's Morse code, and that's the way we talk to computers. That's the way we program computers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, over time, processing power got better, and that evolved into us saying, hey, there might be a better way than to stock all our sort of closets with these punch cards. So how about if we create languages on top of that, and we can abstract to those languages? So instead of sort of feeding the ones and zeros, we can create a language that allows us to do this better. Over time, these programming languages evolved into what is now called visual programming or no code. And what it really is just an extra layer of abstraction. So it's basically just a way, a visual interface to be able to build software that allows you to do that without understanding coding language and without having to know how to code at all to be able to build software. So some people like thinking of it like building blocks of code that you're just kind of building like Lego. Others like talking about it like more you're designing in PowerPoint and you put the kind of logic of what you would have in Excel behind it. But I think you understand that there's code behind everything that you're doing. You're just not interacting with that code. So this is really a very innovative new way of building software in a time where more and more companies, every single company requires some sort of software. So it's going to be one of the biggest expenses we have launching our startup, et cetera, et cetera. Now, no code is a set of tools. So the evolution of these tools, we saw some versions of no code in WordPress and Drupal in the 2000s. By 2010, we saw some of the first no-code platforms come out. So real no code, you don't need to code at all. You can build an e-commerce store with Shopify. You can build a landing page or a website with Wix or Squarespace, Weebly. Now, these were incredibly powerful tools back in the day, but we all know that they were relatively templated. So templated, very limited in what you could actually build. So it was sort of very simplified. So when we talk about no code, we're talking about this whole new generation of sort of platforms, tools, no-code builders that allow you to build much more in-depth software. You can also build simple software, much more intuitive, and can build much more exciting softwares that can take advantage of more and more opportunities. So now the sky is kind of the limit, and this is why right now is such an exciting time in the no-code space. Now, there are over 1,200 tools or builders that claim to be no-code. So it can be very overwhelming when you see all of the different platforms and what you can do with them. But how does no code actually work? Let's cover that before we go into more details. And again, I'll be showing you guys some examples in just a moment as well, so you can get a much more clear sort of idea of it. So how does no code actually work? Well, if you look at the way that designing works, it used to just be writing out individual lines of code, and on the left you can see how that looked. When we're doing this with no code, we're essentially looking at a visual drag and drop interface that allows you to create the design, adapt the design as you wish, with a lot more flexibility as well. So that's a really exciting thing on the design side. Then when we look into creating the logic, again, it was writing it with individual lines of code. Now we're talking about doing it in plain English. So essentially breaking down the steps in plain English in terms of the logic. If someone sort of hovers over this button, I want that button to go from blue to gray, for example, right? That would be a kind of logic. And since it's in plain English, it's just much more easy to do for non-technical people. Then a couple examples of platforms. Each one has a different interface. So this is a no-code builder called Webflow. Really nice. You can see it looks a little bit like a designer. So for those of you who know Photoshop, it looks a little bit like that. Super beautiful to build front-end experiences, et cetera, et cetera. We have others like Adalo that are focused mainly on iOS and Android apps, so mobile native first apps. Again, there's components that have been pre-built. There are all types of other experiences you can sort of put forth. It has a database. It's an all-in-one builder. Here's another builder called Bubble. This is amazing for very in-depth and complex web apps. So you can go as complex as you would like. You can bring in all sorts of amazing features, and it's just really impressive what you can really do. So again, here, for example, it's when you sign up a user, when the person clicks that button, you want to sign up the user, you want to send them an email, you want them to go to the homepage or potentially to the dashboard. So the workflows actually are all in plain English as well, which makes them way more adaptable for the average human being. So that's why all of these are so exciting. Now let's talk a little bit about the benefits for startups. And for those of you who can hear dogs in the background, that's because there are dogs in the background. So essentially, let's talk about what the benefits are for startups. But don't take my word for it. I'm going to be showing you a little chart that was created by some investors who are in London. They're called Forward Partners, and they talk about the new model being building with no code, the old model building with software engineers. So here are some of the benefits that they outline. Time to build that first product, that app, that MVP, 1 year. With no code, it takes 6 weeks. The cost of building an app will go from $50,000 in the old model down to less than $1,000. The team size, you need multiple people building in the old model, front-end developers, back-end developers, product managers, designers, et cetera, et cetera. Here you have one person who's able to do it. And prior to no code, you needed a highly technical team. Now you can do it with a non-technical team or as one individual again. So it's very, very powerful. And it's really no surprise that some of the most notorious investors in Silicon Valley, like Jason Calacanis, are saying amazing things about no code. Here, his quote is that startups being able to get to year 2 with $250,000 in revenue without ever having a developer is the greatest unlock I can think of right now for our economy and for entrepreneurship. And I could not agree with him more. This is really completely changing the game when it comes to product development and also reinventing early stage entrepreneurship completely. So let's look at some real world examples here. So we are not just talking about fluff. Here are a couple platforms that we've built. The first one being Clear Segment. This is actually an interesting story. We built this one to simply record modules and to teach people how to build leveraging some of the platforms that we built this with. It's a SaaS platform, so software as a service. People sign up and they pay on a monthly basis to have access to it. And it was built in 10 days, and this is no joke. We built this for $40. So that's how much it cost to build the platform. For those of you interested, it's going to cost about $235 to maintain the platform for the next 6 months. And again, we did it just so we could teach this handful of tools that are a couple of tools that plug well together to be able to create these software as a service platforms. So again, Clear Segments are just a great example. And funny enough, about 8 of those 10 days were not building. They were actually strategizing around what the actual value proposition was, how we should build it, writing out the copy, creating some of the elements for it. So it's really just impressive how quickly you can build very powerful platforms. Here's another platform. It's called Proofreader. We built this. It's essentially a way to proofread visual content. So you can upload an image. You can take a photo of anything that has text on it, or upload a pitch deck, for example, and it will proofread it. So how did we actually build this? This cost $500, and it was built in 21 days. The tools that we leveraged were Webflow to build the front end, and then we also plugged into existing features that Google had already created the technology behind, such as visual recognition. So we tapped into the Cloud Vision API to be able to do that. And then we tapped into the Language Tool API to be able to do the proofreading for us. So we didn't actually build out those features. We were just able to leverage them from third parties. And I'll explain how this works in a little bit later. but you can build incredibly powerful things with no code. Sizely, the platform that I mentioned earlier, now here, this has not been updated since, but essentially $1,000, 90 days, 35,000 users, and the revenue is $15,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Then we have this one, which is Clamly, a platform that we built. Essentially, this was a crypto miner, so you essentially could shorten a URL, and crypto mining would happen in the background, and you could earn money from sharing your links. Now, this one cost $600 to build. It was built in 14 days, and the monthly user base was 200,000 people at its sort of peak. Now, it generated $38,000 and had to be closed down because eventually the browsers did not allow you to do crypto mining in browser. So this one was shut down, but as you can see, profitable endeavor for not that much effort. And so that really just explains some of the amazingly powerful things you can do. I want to take a second to kind of explain how all this works. So essentially, most of the time, you can build your entire platform 100% with these no-code tools. So you can have login, sign up, payment integrations. You can have a database, user management. You can have incredibly complex or simple logic flows, notifications. A user has his own sort of back-end area or dashboard. All these things can be done. You can charge them, and that already is a startup. You can have different tiers. You can take a percentage. You can do all of that. But sometimes there are certain things that you might want to get from third party, either because it's just too much of a hassle to build it out at first yourself until you know people really want it. So you can tap into, for example, AI models, either that you've developed separately, leveraging no code. You can also build AI with no code. Or potentially you can leverage third parties. So you can, Google, as we talked about earlier, has all sorts of APIs. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of APIs out there that you can leverage to be able to bring in that technology. So other good example is, what if I want some data? So what if I want traffic data, in real time? What if I want, to have weather data that constantly is changing? It has to update in my system as it changes. These are all things that you can do, not to mention that Amazon, Google, Microsoft, every big player pretty much has a huge number of APIs, and also other services like AWS that you can use within your no-code stack. You can build these connections, these API connections, 100% with no-code too. So it's really exciting what is now possible, and it doesn't take too much time to build really impressive things. A couple examples. Here's Nadeem. He scaled his startup Nuage Stay, which is a luxury Airbnb, from a couple $100,000 to $5 million, leveraging these no-code platforms below. He took zero investment or funding for this endeavor. So this is really important to understand, that this is shifting the dynamic of entrepreneurship and product development. Then we have people who don't want to necessarily make money, right? They're looking to create and give back to the community. So this is Alessandro. He created this free app essentially for to give resources to low-income communities. He built it. It's called the Rizzo app, and he was able to do that very quickly and cost-effectively with no code. Then you have the story of Danny, always a great story. She actually was just fed up and kind of burnt out at her day job. She made the jump of actually just quitting with no plan B. Not necessarily what we advise people to do at first. I'll talk about that later. But it is one of the strategies. She built Scribbly in 8 weeks with no-code tools and was able to scale it in 12 months to $20,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Again, this was the same stack as we used to build ClearSegment, which is a SaaS platform similarly to this one. But what other kind of things can you build? You can build apps like Lyft, Uber, Tinder, WhatsApp, Instacart, where you have features like real-time, sort of geolocation, messaging, real-time tracking, all these things. You can also build marketplaces. So Airbnb, Upwork, Amazon, Indiegogo, anywhere where you are acting as the middleman between two parties, buyers and sellers, and you're taking a percentage. So for example, creating profiles or house listings, if we're talking about Airbnb, where you have split payments, maybe you take a 10% margin on every transaction that goes through the platform, all fully buildable and have been built in no code as well. You could build social networks like YouTube, LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the popular ones you pretty much know. So messaging features, notifications, where you can upload like images, videos, all these kind of things, likes, comments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. and others that I wouldn't classify in any specific way, but just like Netflix, subscription for video, or Salesforce, a CRM, or Pipedrive, like internal tools to be able to drive more sales. Slack, Eventbrite, even Zoom has been cloned in no code. So all these additional features, video calls, streaming, automation, these are all possible with no code. And if you want to check out our website, wearenocode.com/showcase, we have a bunch more of examples. So how fast can you build with no code is one of the questions we often get. Now here it really just depends. It can take either a couple weeks or a couple months. It really just depends on what you're building. Is it something simple or is it something more complex? More complex would be when you're trying to potentially tie in very, AI or machine learning, or if you're trying to do things that are a little bit more complex with the API, or where you're trying to, again, bring in some more complex features. So this is really, once you've learned it, each platform has a different sort of learning curve to it. Some are quicker to learn, but have limitations in terms of what can be built. Others can build anything, but it's much longer to learn. So these are some of the things we like to talk to people about. So another question we get is, can I build my specific app leveraging no code? So it kind of doesn't really matter what software you're building. The answer is most likely yes. In 95% of the cases, it is a yes. However, there's a huge however, and this is something I want to emphasize because it's kind of a turning point in this presentation. I want to warn everyone that building is not enough. And I saw this having seen thousands of startups go down the process of entrepreneurship. And unfortunately, 90% of all iOS apps in the App Store right now are zombie apps. They haven't been used in the past 30 days. And the number one reasons why startup fails is because there's no market need. So people go out there, they build that app, that idea they have in their head, and they haven't necessarily done all the other work that has to be done behind their startups. And then they fail because guess what? You built something that people didn't want, and it's very difficult to unbuild, rebuild, et cetera, et cetera. The strategy is usually, I have an idea, I go ahead and build it, either myself or hire people, as we mentioned earlier. And then what's the issue? I bring it to market, realize that people don't necessarily want it. It's this idea of build it and they will come. It is a huge myth. In fact, there is the godfather of entrepreneurship. His name is Steve Blank, and he says, build and they will come is not a strategy, it's a prayer. So, this is not necessarily the right approach to entrepreneurship. And this is simply, I've made this mistake as well in early startups because I just went through kind of intuition, and it is very counterintuitive to build startups. A product is not a startup. Let me just remind people of that. And when you really understand that, you realize that the most important thing is not necessarily the product, but it's actually the distribution and the bringing things to market. So there are all these other things that you have to understand in terms of the way that you build that startup, or you go about building your idea. You need to understand what customers actually want. So what's the difference between what you think and what they want? What business model is going to be the best to capture your paying customers? What pricing should you be using? Sales, how can you go about getting customers? How can you go about marketing to even have your sales representatives have people to talk to? Partnerships, building out the team, figuring out if you're looking to bootstrap and kind of just grow the revenues yourself, or do you want to raise money? There are thousands of different things. And this is why I wanted to really talk to you a little bit about the step-by-step methodology to building startups as a non-technical person. I'll give a bit of a bird's eye view, and then we'll jump into some of the individual ones. So here's the process from start to finish. First of all, you want to set hypotheses, get very clear about what you're actually looking to build, or what your idea is. I can't stress how important this part is. After that, you want to do customer discovery, because we want to understand what's the difference between our idea and what the market is actually saying that they want. Now, there's a huge difference between what we say we want as humans and what we are actually doing. And this is why we need to bridge that gap with building a market test. So we're going to leverage no-code platforms to be able to do this, but essentially we need to figure out if people are actually taking actions that show they want to buy from you before we actually build out the entire product, right? Then what we're going to do is go out there and start promoting this offer, and start to acquire first users. And essentially, we're going to want to set up tracking analytics so that we can measure what's going on and improve that experience. And we're then going to build out the features that we've been told by our customer base they want, they're willing to pay for, and they've proven to us that they are willing to take an action that proves that they are willing to buy. So at that point, we're going to leverage no-code tools to build out the entire platform. Now, I'll talk about how we do that. When I say entire platform, we're talking about only a couple features to begin with. And then at the end, you literally can just fulfill that product to the customer who's already lined up to buy it, and then you're making revenue right out of the gate as soon as you launch. So let's talk about this first one, setting hypothesis. Let's take the example of Airbnb. Now, there's some key assumptions behind Airbnb that made it very, very risky at first, right? One of those assumptions was, is someone who has a home or a second home willing to rent it out to random people? If the answer was no, then Airbnb would look very different than it does today. We all know that it, was successful in proving that experiment, and it built out features that sort of essentially were able to, give that to people who wanted it. In this phase, what we're doing is really just putting those assumptions to rest to reduce the risk of the startup for yourself as a startup founder who's actually the first investor in your startup of time and money, but also for future investors and teammates, and really just setting those hypotheses. And then what we're going to do is go out there and talk to customers. So here, you don't want to talk about your product at all. As soon as you start doing that, you are actually not going to get the right results from what you're looking for. Here, the idea is, how does my idea align with what people think or say that they want, right? And of course, we need to prepare a questionnaire. There's a very specific way about interviewing people. You want to analyze that data in a scientific way, not necessarily just guessing or going with your gut, and really understand what the market is saying that they want. So this is a series of interviews. They're best done either over the phone or in person via Skype. And after that, what we're going to do is go ahead and build out that first market test. So here, the idea is we need to test whether people are willing to take an action that proves that they want to buy what you have to sell, your value proposition, not your product, the value that you're telling them they will get from using your product. And so here, what we want to do is essentially, build out a smoke test that's going to validate and start bringing leads in for you. And you're going to be able to understand what the market really wants at this point. What we want to do here, you need to actually build out a first initial brand. So just like a logo, all these different elements, the copywriting, and then you're going to want to build this out fully leveraging no-code platforms. And we're going to put that to the test right after we've attached tracking and analytics to understand exactly what people are doing. So we want to see exactly where people are clicking. If we're losing people, where are we losing them? And how can we improve that? And if it's really about, usually it's about really nailing here the value that the customer is looking to get from the product offering you have. After that, again, we'll go out there and promote it. So you can start acquiring users and engaging with them. This is to get a deeper understanding of what it is that exactly that you have to build, but also you start building a pipeline of future customers. So it's very practical. So here, what you're going to want to do is you want to have a very targeted outreach list, and we're going to do things relatively manually and very personal. So we're going to be engaging with online communities. We're going to essentially be figuring out where are these individuals who I believe want to buy what I have, and how can we reach them? How can we interact with them? There are a number of ways to do this through paid ads. You can also do it through like manually through sales, which is really insightful when it comes to getting feedback from those customers. And so again, this is going to be step 4, promoting and selling. Then you know exactly what people want at this phase and who you're building for and who you're not building for. So you can go ahead and build out that MVP based on the requests that you've received. And here you're going to need to identify the right no-code tools to build the product. And you're going to want to only build the key functionalities and make them usable on every single device so you can maximize the people that you're reaching. Here is a great example, actually, of how you should or should not be building your MVP. We're talking about solving the transportation problem, for example. None of these iterations of a car brings you quicker from point A to point B until that final product. And so you can't actually sell 2 wheels. It's not going to bring you quicker to work. You can't sell half a car. You can only sell a whole car. And the cost to get to that end car or that first product is just going to be a huge amount of money. So it's very risky. Instead, what you want to do is build products this way, where every iteration of your product is solving the problem and is getting increasingly good at solving that problem and is charging more along the way. So a skateboard is just quicker to get you from point A to point B than walking. A bicycle is going to be quicker than the skateboard. A car is going to be quick on that bicycle, but essentially we're able to make money from each iteration of the product because we're solving a specific person's problem. Step 6, this is the glory days. This is basically you just get your first paying customers and you fulfill the MVP. But it's also the beginning of a very interesting phase where you are going to learn how to improve, get feedback from that first product and improve it based on what people want, and also prioritize your features only based on what people are willing to pay for. So if you followed until this moment, I want to congratulate you, because simply by using this methodology, you're going to save yourself a huge amount of time and money. And so at this point, I wanted to tell you that the great thing is that you can get started now. You essentially know that no code exists. There are, there's a process you can go through that I just talked about to essentially build out that startup without taking huge amounts of risk. And you can find so many resources for free online immediately. Now, there's a couple of things that people really have issues with, and I wanted to mention that immediately. Here's where most people get stuck. There are way too many tools out there. People have no idea which ones to use for theirs. They get lost in endlessly looking through tools, testing them out, and never actually following through with building to something specific. The other problem is that they need, they have no idea how to actually get started. So they need that step by step. So it's like broken down into actionable steps, right? Another problem is that as you go through the build, there are different questions that come out. They might be technical questions. They might be questions that are sort of more about the go-to-market or the strategy behind your startup. And so people need that ongoing support, the accountability as well of an additional, of a community. And of course, people have limited time and money, not to mention they are competing against other founders who have maybe more experience than them. So they need to take the accelerated route, right? No one has, a huge amount of time to invest in these kind of things early on. And so you need to maximize the bang for your buck that you can put in. So that's why we created the No Code Startup. We're talking a little bit about this now. It is essentially an action-based program for non-technical founders to build, launch, and monetize their startup idea without writing a single line of code. So we've really structured a program that gives everything founders need to go from idea all the way to first paying customers and figuring out what the growth path is for you. Should you bootstrap and should you take investment from investors? Should you join an accelerator program that invests as well? There are different routes, but we want to provide everything in one program. And our goal is really to empower non-technical founders. We help them essentially build out their app idea without being a techie, learn the skills to be able to do that, to acquire customers and turn them into, users, and turn those progressively into paying customers, and then just save a huge amount of time and money along the journey and get the support that you need to increase your chances of success. So we basically like to compare it. It's a cross-section between a startup accelerator, where we teach people how to actually build and launch companies cost-effectively, and also how to build products leveraging these no-code platforms. We specifically focus in on a handful of platforms that we've curated from thousands of platforms out there. And we provide everything that people need throughout the process. So with Teachable Discover, for example, you will have the entire video curriculum or the online course. You also have coaching sessions every single week, as well as a massive perks package of $300,000 of discounts. We have a private video support channel with each founder. We have a large community, and we've started doing networking as well, because people have just been very thirsty to interact with other people, and that's been so fun to do as well. So everything you essentially need to go through the process. Our curriculum, what do we cover in this curriculum? Well, the first thing is that we go from idea and validation. Then we go into building and launching. And then we actually talk and teach you how to go about selling and growing. So modules like finding and evaluating ideas. Some people come to us, they have one idea. Some people have thousands of ideas and figuring out which ones to go take action with first. Others have no idea, and that's also totally fine. We'll talk about it in a second. We have modules that talk about how to go about customer discovery and development, very specifically, step by step. You don't have to go around the internet trying to figure it out on your own. We also talk and teach you how to build a brand from the ground up and build that content that you need to build out that first MVP, that first product, that first app. because guess what? You need visuals, you need to have a logo, you need to copyright. All these different things are very important skills early on, and you can do them quite easily without having designers. We also teach how to build, right, and launch. So first, building out that smoke test, leveraging no-code platforms. Also, how to attach tracking and analytics, and how you can actually see insight and really take action from those insights. And of course, building more complex MVPs. We have several modules that talk about that. We have different paths based on what you're building specifically. And when it comes to selling, we actually cover sales and marketing, how to acquire your first 100 customers, how then, once you've actually acquired customers, you can go ahead and build a pitch deck, a financial forecast to start presenting this, potentially to get grants, potentially for investors, and also how to fundraise and get into accelerators or increase your chances to be able to do that. So for the founders who get to the phase where they have revenue and all that, we are happy to introduce you to people within our network that we've built, and those people are both in California and also in Europe. The program package itself comes with, one, the step-by-step video curriculum within Teachable, so access to over 100 videos, a really detailed breakdown. We learn at your own pace and also start at any level. So if you're coming in with an idea, that's great. If you're coming in and you just want to build and you want support throughout that process, we're also happy to be able to do that, and we cover that within the program. Then, one thing I'd like to mention is this is a no-fluff, action-based program. So it's not just about learning and watching Netflix and kind of feeling like you've learned something. It's not the format that you'll see in universities where there is lectures. It is really a format which is, we're going to teach you a concept so you can take action with it. And so we have accelerator modules where we teach sales, business models, pricing, marketing. We also provide templates, workbooks, and blueprints so you can take action with the concept that we teach you immediately. Then we actually teach click by click a handful of the most powerful no-code platforms, all in one program. So Webflow, Bubble, Airtable, MemberStack, Zapier, JetBoost, and that allows you to build a diverse number of different apps. We also have experience with more no-code platforms. These are the ones that we are teaching at the moment. We are also continually adding modules to our curriculum. So as that actually grows out, you also, as a member of our community and our program, you get access to that as well. Now, the place where we are more than just an online course is that we have live weekly coaching and mentorship with myself and Eddie directly, who have a combined 30 years of experience in this space. So you can pretty much ask us anything. You get personal feedback on all the questions that you have. And you can also get sort of through any roadblock, which is very important because being able to see sort of progress is so important to your success and your upkeeping that motivation that's going to allow you to work the amount of time that it's going to require to really be successful at your startup. So, from a technical question to, oh, can you look over my pitch deck? I'm about to pitch to some investors. Great. That's absolutely something that we can do. Now, since you don't want to wait for that one time a week for the coaching sessions, you also have a private video support channel. So essentially a channel where you can ask us questions by sending us a video and showing us what the issue is, and we will send you a video back, just like you can see here, showing you how to resolve that problem. So you send us the actual link to what you're building, and we will help you throughout that process as you're going through it. So you get video answers, which are way better than just text answers. You also get feedback on your work if you want it. So again, that pitch deck, a great example was Heidi, who I was talking about earlier. She just sent me a video pitch of herself, just pitching the same way that Eddie is in this image, but essentially pitching and showing her pitch deck behind it. And I sent her back a video giving her some constructive criticism on things that she should be editing and changing. We also have a massive perks package. So we have $300,000 worth of perks. So it's 175 different services. Pretty much all the no-code platforms we teach, you'll have free access to them at first. And you also have access to more than 170 additional platforms. This will just save you a bunch of money, and the list continues to grow. We're constantly being contacted by these service providers. These are both tools like no-code platforms, but also email marketing tools, AWS credits, tracking and analytics, everything that you can imagine. We have discounts for those platforms probably. So again, here are a handful of the different ones. Notion, $1,000 of credit on Notion, 6 months for free on Typeform, 6 months for free on Adalo. We have $120,000 credit on IBM Cloud. We also have, Airtable, AWS, huge amounts of discounts. Again, 175, won't mention them all right now. The fifth thing that you will get is access to our global founder community. So more than 350 founders. We're coming from 23 different countries. This is actually impressive because we were only focused on the US. We started getting people coming in from everywhere. So it's been very exciting. You can connect with other founders in this way. You can also get feedback on your idea and find co-founders, friends, accountability buddies. It's been great to see how things have been developing. And because, again, there's so much thirst to interact, we've started creating these speed networking events that have seen a lot of success, where you can just meet up for 5 minutes once a month with founders and essentially share ideas, exchange skills. I mean, we have lawyers, we have people in real estate, we have PhDs, MBAs, we have people who don't even have a university degree. We have a really diverse body of students, and that really enriches the experience of joining the community as well. So, a couple little details. You can start anywhere you want. So whether you have an idea or you are in the middle of building your product and you're frustrated with developers, you can take it at your own pace, whether you have a full 9-to-5 job or you are a full-time entrepreneur. You can also take time off and basically continue where you left off. This is entrepreneurship. The most important thing is to continually put in work towards your vision and mission, and essentially slowly get traction over time. It's just so important. Like, all of this takes work. That's the bottom line. But what we really try to do is take what the first-time founder's traditional path looks like, which is this, cost $50,000 in a year of your life, and we bring it down to a process that looks much more like this, where there's no straight line. For those of you who want to know, building startups is still an up and down process. But essentially, if you can get your product launched and in less than 3 months and for less than $1,000, that is a huge success. And for our promise is that you'll achieve more in 3 months than most people do in 3 years. And that's just from having gone through all these startup accelerators, having seen the applicants. Again, we were taking in 8 teams out of 400 teams every 6 months. So, I got to see a good amount of deal flow and where people were at and the mistakes that they were making along the process. Our program tuition is $1,997. Now, this is equal to 1 credit a major university. You have to apply through our website. But of course, since we are in this event and we were partnered with Discover, we are putting on an absolutely exclusive discount for our tuition, a reduced tuition for the next 7 days that gives you access to everything I just mentioned for 50% off tuition. So you can actually get lifetime access for $997 to the accelerator modules, to all the no-code modules, teaching you and upskilling you on how to build platforms and scale those. The $300,000 worth of discounts, the coaching, the global community, the private video support as well, very important, and the speed networking events as well. Now, this is lifetime membership, and we're going to be closing that down once we reach 500 members in our members. We have 350 as it stands. Now, for those of you who are watching the replay, I don't know when you will watch this, hopefully in time. But we would love to have you. You can actually click on the right-hand side and you can join at that discounted rate immediately. This again will be for the next 7 days. This is our partnership with Teachable Discover. So again, thank Teachable for putting this on. We do not put on this price at ever. So basically, it's a great opportunity for those of you who are interested in working with experienced people within this space. Again, both from coaching on the startup side and from building platforms on the no-code side. For those of you who are wondering about a payment plan, we do allow people to pay in 3 different monthly installments. This comes out a little bit more expensive, but allows you to join today for $397. And you can pay in one sort of time, and that, again, is the preferable option if you can, simply because you can save $200 along the way. Now, you can access it right here, and you'll get access to that discount that Teachable has kindly put up for us. I believe that link is below or in the chat. I'm sure Jonah is putting it up right now. 30-day refund guarantee. No other program that teaches you entrepreneurship at a university or a boot camp will give you this kind of a refund guarantee. Now, we do this because we have full confidence in our program, and we know the value that we're bringing to our students, and they are really stoked to be a part of it. So, we just feel confident. And again, no other institute will really kind of do this. We think it's just the fair thing to do. If you don't see progress throughout our program, or you don't feel like it's a good fit, that's absolutely fine. You'll get 100% of your money back. We've also seen students, funny enough, getting this program 100% for free. So some of them have actually been able to discuss, let me explain this. Some are able to actually make an educational expense on their company. So that's tax deductible. It's not necessarily free. You pay for it, but you can deduct it from your taxable income at the end of the year. And then you also have some students right now who have been able to get their employers to pay for it. Many, many employers out there, you may or may not know this, have I think it's like $2,000 to $5,000 a year to spend on educational expenses. And we can give you an invoice talking about essentially a program that helps you learn how to program without coding. So you can get it paid for by your company in many cases. Now, this is a repeatable framework. I like to talk about this because people don't realize that once you learn these skills, these really hard skills, you can actually put them to work for not just one startup idea, but also for several startups in the future. So these are skills really about upskilling you as a startup founder. And we have so many founders in our community who constantly give us so many props for our product. If you go on our website, you can also see a bunch of video testimonials, just putting a couple of them here. But again, it's just so rewarding for us to see so many students have success within our program, because it's showing us that, hey, this is huge. Like, this is the beginning of a movement. Like right now, if you're a solopreneur who's non-technical, you can build a scalable company that can become very profitable. And so we always say you only have to be right once to change your life completely. Now, again, our aim for you is to help you become a founder of the future. So what does that really mean? It means that you're a person who's able to identify and fine-tune opportunities extremely quickly. You're a person who's able to actually build out your apps, your software, your MVPs cost-effectively and without developers. It's a person who's able to turn and iterate sort of users into paying customers without having to be sort of a sleazy salesman or something like that. If you have the right product and it really gives the right value to that right customer base, you don't have to push. You get pull from the market. And that's a very different dynamic than going out there and having to try to push your product onto people. People hate doing that, including myself. And of course, the main goal is for people to be able to build the startup of their dreams, right? A lot of people have aspirational sort of goals in life. We want to constantly grow and to build out things. We want self-reliance. And I think one of the main messages that I have for all of you today is that you can actually do it. Entrepreneurship is a learned skill again. And I cannot tell you what the feeling of becoming self-reliant, because you don't have to depend on external developers to get things started. You do not have to depend on anyone else but yourself. It is one of the most empowering feelings that you can get. And I've seen so many people go from nothing to transformed into, I can launch any idea. The freedom that kind of sort of gives you. And again, it's not something that you have to take huge risks. You don't have to spend all of your savings. You don't have to take the risk of at first leaving your 9-to-5 to testing this out. So again, the most important thing is to get started, to learn skills, and to invest in the process. There is no secret sauce. It's about basically putting in work over time to reach the goals that we all know we're capable of. So that's pretty much it for me. If this sounds something you'd like to be a part of, we'd love to have you join. You can click on that link and join immediately. Me and Eddie love to see new people. As soon as they come in, we have our entire community who starts engaging with them. So that's also great to see that there's sort of this entire thing that's out of our hands, this community of people who believe in hard work and in the results you can get if you believe in investing in yourself. So yeah, we'd love to have you as part of that. And if not, we are excited to send you the toolkit as well. You'll get that regardless. So you'll be able to start regardless of whether you join the program or not. We give you a fast route to success. And so, yeah, thanks so much for everyone who's joining. Again, my name was Christian Peverelli. And I guess I can take a little breath now and Jonah will come live. We do have some sort of frequently asked questions if there aren't any specific questions, but Jonah, I'm sure you will guide me here on what some of the questions are happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for everyone watching, please hop in the chat. Thank Christian for his time. Feel free to ask any questions. You always pack so much in your presentations.
I know.
Well, and I appreciate it too, because I'm always like, I'll have a question, and then 2 seconds later you answer it, and I'm like, well, he's really good at this.
I guess I've heard a lot of the common questions that come through. And so
right.
We've started incorporating those as part of the presentation as we've realized they're just recurring.
Yeah.
But we received lots of questions, from like the program side or no code side. So
Yeah. Well, I especially love this presentation. You had the analogy of the car, and that's such a clear, good analogy of just how you can structure a business. You don't have to be waiting for the final product. The beauty of no code is every part of it can be sellable, which I
yeah.
think we get sold this like Shark Tank version of what a company can be nowadays that isn't really accurate to what it can be.
I
Um,
totally agree. I mean, like, what's funny as well, like people don't pay attention to this as much, but like as soon as you get into Shark Tank, as soon as the thing's pitched, like, oh, great pitch. First thing they're talking about is like, what's your revenue? Like, it's like,
right.
oh, what's your revenue? What's your last
Right.
quarter's revenue? What do you have? So it's like, I think there's definitely this narrative just from reading the articles of like this 20-year-olds doing like very little and having success and like Facebook stories, I think there are movies being made about entrepreneurship that just simplify the process. But I think the big catch is just like, regardless of what you're trying to do, like it's more about like, it's you got to build a company before people can be interested, and all this takes time, right? And it's like, so why not take a route which is going to allow you to at least do the right actions? Because I can tell you, the first time that I built a startup, I did exactly all the mistakes that we're talking about. I only realized that this was a bigger problem once I was looking at hundreds of applications all the time and being like, oh, so everyone is doing this, like, because that's the way that you would think you should go about it, right? I have an idea. Oh, I don't know how to code. Okay, well, I'll get someone to code it for me, and then I'll just like bring it to market, and people, and it's interesting. You just have to build both at the same time. And the most important thing to like increase your chances of success is just like learning the skills. And right now, these are like the skills of the future. This is going
Yeah.
to be the way that people build products for the next 30 years. The past
Well,
50 years were developers. And yeah,
well,
sorry.
and no, 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 no. I'm interrupting you, but I think what's more and more exciting for me every time you do this presentation, I recognize little things, and I start getting suspicious of the companies I might already be using that are no code based, and I just have no idea. Like I think it's much more prevalent than a lot of people would assume it is, because you
Yeah.
always assume if something's flashy and looks good, there's a lot of money behind it, and
Yeah.
it's
I
a
mean,
lot
we've
of
seen a huge, like, we have, like, at first we're like, we're just doing this for entrepreneurs. But now we've had a large number of like people who are like small, medium businesses who are like, hey, I need to automate stuff. I need to like build a little bit of software here and there.
Mhm.
Like, there's so many things that I need to do. And it's incredible how much people can benefit from these skills when they already have existing customers. I mean, we're talking about like saving 40% of your time on certain things, just because you might have built something that allows that to happen automatically. That happens a lot with like qualifying leads, with like also being able to deliver the value. We're only building the software to deliver the value to the humans. At first, we're actually just doing it manually, and that's the best way to
Mm.
understand that market in a really deep way. That gives us insight to build out that scalable Airbnb kind of like model. But it's no sort of and then there's this whole other dynamic happening in the industry, which is like people pitching like make money online programs where they make you seem like it's just like super easy, you don't have to do any work, and it's just like it's just a waste of money. It's like you can learn some interesting skills, but like their promise is basically, yeah, do nothing from home with no technical skills at all. And so it's been interesting to see
Right.
this. I think we're on the verge of a huge reform of the educational system, which was kind of like created for the industrial revolution, where we needed to hold jobs and do specific tasks. And now it's like, no, like even employers right now are like looking for people. Like Hulu is hiring no coders right now, and me
Right.
right now. Like you have like Chipotle, who's launching new products with no code. Like even the big companies are starting to realize that there is more effective ways to go about their innovation internally. So this is something that will span not just entrepreneurship, but pretty much every industry moving forward. And the tools will continue to get more and more exciting in terms of what they can do. Right now, I've just seen that there are platforms reaching out to me talking about being able to build kind of blockchain technology with no code, which until right now, like that was one of the limitations. But they're reaching out to me because we have a prevalent community, and I'm constantly like moderating no code events, and people are asking me to speak and all that. So I guess the word is going out, and for us the most important thing is the people just get started. Like
Right.
it's actually a human thing that's happening. It's kind of the same thing as like people telling you, oh, I wish I learned how to play guitar. It's like, how old are you? oh, I'm 35 or I'm 45 or I'm 60. I don't mind. It's like, okay, you realize you can, like, in 1 year from whatever time it is now, if you just take like
You
one
can play
lesson,
guitar.
yeah, one lesson a
Yeah.
month. And it's a great analogy because I actually went through that myself, both in playing guitar and being like, but people kind of feel like they're like, oh no, either I'm the absolute best at this or I'm nothing. They don't want to be
Right.
beginners. And I think, like, in entrepreneurship, you need to basically humble down and realize, like, hey, the better I get and the smarter I get at, and the more skills I have in terms of strategies to launch, to acquire customers, to build things, like, the better and the more likely I am to succeed. And that's something you carry with you. It's like this concept of, like, hey, invest in yourself. But people also just need to stop learning things that are just theory. Like,
Right.
we're in an outward facing world. Like, people are, you have to go out there and build stuff and be wrong, like, a lot. And it's fine. Like, that doesn't mean, so one of the things we see is people having to let go of that perfectionist side they have to themselves, where they're like, my identity is everything that I output. So they're scared of launching something before it's 100% polished and finished. And that ends up being their biggest demise, because they end up spending so much money and time to build a perfect thing that they then bring to market and realize no one wants. And so,
Well,
yeah,
and they
that's my
trap
mission.
your
It's like, save
yeah.
people from themselves.
Right. Well, and it's almost a negative feedback loop, right? Where if you keep doing that, you're going to keep being convinced you can't accomplish these goals.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest things I'm always inspired by no code is it puts the focus on the creativity. So you don't have to be a coder to build a creative and cool business. And then also the focus on proof of concept, which you do
Hmm.
such a good job of honing in on, which is like, you can build an app, but did you ask anyone if they want it? Do you
Yeah.
actually know if anyone wants
And
it?
this is happening. This is
Yeah.
like a problem that's happening with most startups. It's
Hmm.
not just. It's even the ones who have, like, a great example was, like, I've helped some, like, and you have to build from a holistic perspective. Not, and also, we talk about no code. It's like, this doesn't only have to be no code. We're not extremists. Like, we know a lot about coding as well. So if a
Right.
solution, if there's a specific thing that's best fit for that, we're going to advise people to, hey, go with that. Like, this is something you might have to build out custom. But for the majority of things, people are building the wrong product at the wrong time, and it ends up being kind of like a big, a big downfall, because then people get burnt. They spend too much money, too much time, and then they just don't want to, like, they're just like, "Oh, I guess this was not for me. I'll just go back to my 9 to 5. That's not making me happy right now." And I think it's just like, hey,
Right.
start today, and guess what? You don't have to be a 12-year-old prodigy. Like the guys from Brex or whatever, who, like, started coding at like 7 years old. But it's like, you can build, and people are doing it. I mean, there are no code platforms that have raised millions of dollars, $13 million, like Comet. We have, there are no code platforms like Dividend Finance that have processed over $1 billion in revenue built in no code. Other platform, it's like, this is not just like fun and games. This is like a huge transition, and we're on the verge of a complete reinvention of a lot of different things, specifically product development, and also an innovation and entrepreneurship. Those are like three that for me are like, it's insane. Anyway, I'll keep it at
Yeah.
that. I
I
know we're a
could,
bit over
yeah.
time.
We do have to wrap up for time. I could also just talk about it forever, because I think it's more than the software. It's more than the philosophy. It is reinventing kind of education and business, and making making all of that a little more within reach of people,
Yeah.
just all people in general. And I love it. I think that's more opportunity for everyone to actually have their own business and run their own business and eliminate the barriers. It's so cool.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. It is crazy. Not to mention that now people, regardless of whether you have a university degree, regardless of whether you live in Rwanda, regardless
Right.
of what your skill level currently is, like, this is something that evens the playing field, and I think that is going to be very powerful to see the way that that plays out over the next 15 years.
Yeah.
Um, it basically makes my fancy degree go out the window.
Right. Right. It's the economy of ideas. How good is
Yeah,
an idea, right? And
yeah.
what is it? It's so cool. But now, just to save everyone from the two of us nerding out forever, because it is, I love this so much. I appreciate you, Christian, so much for sharing your expertise, your time. It's inspiring as heck to me. And for everyone watching, if you're watching the replay or if you're watching live now, please thank Christian for his time. If you like videos like this, please like and subscribe to the Discover YouTube. We are consistently trying to bring creators like Christian out here to share their expertise, their finesse, and grow this community of killer creators with wonderful ideas and businesses growing. And Christian, I always like to ask just before we wrap up, uh, do you have any last little parting bit of advice for someone who's maybe not into no code yet? They know they have an idea, they know they want to start a business. They've either had it for years and haven't gotten on it, or it's brand new. But to make that leap into actually starting to build that platform and really make that happen.
Yeah, I think for me it's always about like don't wait until the perfect time because you will wait your entire life. And right now I've been in the process of talking to founders. I do that all the time, and the number of people who have had this idea tormenting themselves
Mm.
for years, just overthinking ideas and all that. It's like, don't you want to sleep well at night? And so the idea is like just launch. Like you can just test the market very cost effectively. And so getting started, I think the other thing I would say is like don't believe the hype. Understand that this is a process of learning and applying those skills. But once you learn those skills, I can tell you they're gonna be with you forever. Not to expect someone to come and save you. Like raising money is trying to get someone to save you. Trying to find a technical co-founder is trying to find someone to save you. Like it's like no, you're capable of doing this yourself. And I can tell you, like people are like, I don't want to be this, the technical co-founder. I don't want to be the technical guy of this startup. That's fine. You might just actually be looking for a non-technical or a technical co-founder as you're building and launching things yourself. Guess what? A great example is one of the students in our program, scaled to about $10,000 in monthly recurring revenue from scratch. And then suddenly, guess what? A bunch of like technical people were like, "Hey, you're looking for a technical co-founder?" It's like, "Oh, well, yeah, you went through all the hard work now, and you get a much better deal. You can give less shares away for that to that co-founder. You can get better terms with investors if that's what you're looking for. It's just getting started is a difficult thing, and I think it's like just build something that you're going to not use, that you're not going to actually be serious about. Like start learning these skills. It's really about getting started. That's like the place where most people get stuck. And so, the reason why we created this program was because like we want people to feel like there's a way where they don't have to just figure it out themselves every day. We built the program we wish we had as non-technical founders 15 years ago. And now the only difference is that it's never been a better time.
Right.
There's three skills. I always say this. There are three skills. And by the way, if you want to like get free tips as well, I'm constantly putting out videos on YouTube. We Are No Code. You can go and follow the channel where we talk about all types of things, how to launch startups, et cetera, et cetera. But also, I would say like no code is a huge competitive advantage to learn right now. Automation is a huge competitive advantage to learn right now. And video marketing. Like these are three things that don't cost you anything and that you can be just ahead of the curve. We're in the game of essentially, creating founders of the future, people who will be able to take advantage of these next opportunities that come for the next 15 years. And that does come with the acquisition of skill. And people should not expect to jump in to know everything. It's it's just counterintuitive. That's what it is.
But
I want to thank you guys as well. The whole Discover team, because you've been so supportive along the way as well, and you're just doing so much great stuff to inform people and bring great speakers who can add value to people. But in the end of the day, like just get started. Like whether you choose to join our program and you want that support and want to go quicker, or you just want to figure it out on your own, like get started. Like, and it's such generic stuff. Yeah. But it literally is like, and I've helped several people transition from like their 9-to-5 into entrepreneurship. And I say it's transition because I always tell them to start on the side at first. And then there's a strategic point at which it really makes sense for you to jump off. And it doesn't when you just have an idea in your head. It doesn't when you're just starting to build a product. So, that's kind of my overall advice. It's a bit corny.
No, I love it. I also love the way you presented. It's not get rich quick. And I think we always focus so much on that going from being working 9 to 5 to having a multi-million-dollar company. But when you see the kind of numbers, even after a few months that some people do, it's like, even if it just means you're working for yourself, you
Oh,
don't have to
yeah,
be rich, but if you're making as much as you were and you're working for yourself, how much better can that be?
that's
So
definitely
I love it so much. I love the ethos, the philosophy, all of it. We do have to wrap up for time, just to be cognizant for everybody. But thank you everyone so much for watching. Christian, thank you so much for being here. And everyone, just to restate, you can find Christian's course in the link in the comments. It's in the bio. It'll also be emailed to you with the replay. And we will see you all soon. Christian, it's always a pleasure. We'll see you around. Thank you for joining us.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Jonah.
Have a good one.